Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us with another Avidyne webinar. Today's topic is the IFD a slide-in replacement for GNS 430 and 530 WAAS or non-WAAS units? My name is William Reichert. I'm Senior Field Service Engineer from Avidyne, and I'm joined today by Tom Harper, our Director of Marketing, and Billy DeMauro, our Digital Marketing Specialist. Before we get started, just please make sure to have your microphones muted, your volume turned up. You're more than welcome to ask questions in the chat. We will go over a question and answer at the end. And this webinar is recorded and will be posted up on our Avidyne YouTube channel later. All right, getting right into it. An overview of the things that we're going to discuss today is some benefits of the GNS to IFD upgrade. Right, and then we'll also discuss some GNS to IFD replacement considerations, including pin assignments that change, pin assignments that remain the same, considerations for non-WAAS aircraft, considerations for aircraft electrical systems, and special case interface changes. We'll have a brief summary, go over some resources, and of course, we'll open it up to questions at the end. So why upgrade from a GNS to an IFD? So the first part is GNS obsolescence. GNSs are no longer being repaired. IFDs don't have an end of life. They're being integrated with multiple systems that we have now coming out. The IFDs have hybrid touch. It adds the hybrid touch function. What that means is that not only do we have our bezel buttons, but the IFDs themselves are also a touch screen. We have a high resolution display. You can see on the photo they are comparing a GNS 430 to an IFD 440, the real estate available, and also the resolution of the display itself. The IFD also adds integrated wireless connectivity. So connecting your iPad or your iPhone is done through Wi-Fi instead of Bluetooth, and that is something that's part of the IFD itself. There's no need for the flight stream devices anymore. IFDs also add synthetic vision, or 3D synthetic vision, which is pictured up there in the IFD 440. So it's a 6 o'clock high kind of view down on the aircraft's GPS position, and it paints the terrain pretty nicely. We also have forward-looking terrain awareness, which is FLTA. So that is like an uncertified version of TAWS, although we do have a certified version available. IFDs have a very easy page and tab user interface, so there's no more nested menus or trying to scroll to a specific page. If it doesn't live on any of the two other buttons, just find which one it does. So we have the FMS page, map page, and of course the auxiliary button. And the IFDs also have a fairly easy learning transition from anyone coming from the GNS world. I myself had an experience with that, so it's a pretty easy learning curve. So now to the main question, is the IFD a slide-in replacement for a GNS? The short answer is yes. The IFDs are designed as a slide-in replacement, but there are a few exceptions, which we will discuss. But for the most part, they use the same connectors, they use the same tray, the same wiring. The IFD support the same 160 in-out interfaces of the GNS series, but also we added about 25 more. So upgrading from a GNS to an IFD dramatically reduces any sort of downtime because the tray itself works as a pre-wired socket. So GNS comes out, IFD goes in. So most GNS to IFD installations require no wiring changes except the following things which we're going to talk about, and we'll go into some of these here. So if you have a non-WAAS unit, the IFDs do support non-WAAS as well. It's a simple configuration and maintenance mode. There's no actual difference between any IFD. So you can either turn WAAS on or off. But of course, most people would like to take advantage of WAAS. So a couple of things you'd have to consider there is make sure that your antenna is not only a WAAS antenna and you have WAAS coaxial cable, but you'll need to have the antenna externally mounted. So they cannot be internally mounted. Some installs have non-WAAS antennas under the glare shield or in the transition area of an aircraft, so those have to be externally mounted. Standby comm audio. So this is optional. The IFD has the ability to monitor a standby comm frequency. So that has to be wired to your audio panel. This was not a function of the GNS originally. We also have terrain alert audio. This is another one of those optional wiring. So these also go to the audio panel, but have to go to an unswitched input for the terrain alerting feature. The GTX 345. So if the IFD is replacing a GNS that was previously connected to a GTX 345 transponder, you'll need to relocate one connection on the GTX connector. And we'll show a wiring diagram that discusses that a little further. And then for 14-volt aircraft, so there is a circuit breaker change. We do require a 7.5 amp breaker versus the 5 amp breaker, and we'll show this again as well. And lastly, all IFDs and GNS do require setup configurations. So once you replace the GNS for an IFD, there's some things that have to be done in maintenance mode. These do not come pre-configured, and each configuration can be different depending on what input you're using. So here's the pin assignments that remain the same. We have from the Garmin manual an actual schematic here from their diagram showing the main power inputs and the main GPS comm and nav antenna inputs. So you can see those side by side with the IFD there. That's from the IFD installation manual. So all the power and grounds remain the same. The GPS remains the same. Radio remains the same. So your comm antenna and nav antenna. Your RS-232 inputs and outputs remain the same, as well as the ARINC 429 outputs. The analog interfaces also remain the same, and the enunciations remain the same. The IFD does offer an extra ARINC 429 output and an extra RS-232 output. So considerations for aircraft electrical systems. So this is an excerpt from the IFD installation manual. If you have a 28-volt aircraft, your 5 amp circuit breaker can remain the same. If you have a 14-volt aircraft, this input does have to change to a 7.5 amp breaker. The IFD also does require a 10 amp breaker for the comm. So, and we have a little example of what that would look like on your aircraft circuit breaker panel. So here's some pin assignments that change between the GNS and the IFD. A lot of pins in the GNS were either not connected or reserved for future use, which have now been repurposed by the IFD. And this really depends on what functionality you want to get out of the IFD. It has a lot to offer, but some cases may require a couple of changes here. So a big one that in tech support we get asked about a lot is pin 8 from the IFD on the 1001 connector. The IFD will send a weight on wheels discrete output to many different kinds of transponders to determine when the transponder is on the ground versus airborne, and it happens at a speed, a GPS speed of about 25 knots. And then we have the comm monitor function. So this is a standby comm monitor function. To take advantage of this, it will have to get wired to your audio panel. Some audio panels have a dedicated comm monitor function, so it'll actually say comm mon 1 or 2. So like in the case of the AMX 240, a lot of people have some older audio panels, which that works just fine too, that don't have any ADF or DME, which the IFD can actually use these for that input. We also have some additional functions with the IFD500 series. So just to go over these quickly, we do accept radar, so onboard radar for weather. So that's an ARINC 453 input. We also have an extra ARINC output for Part 25 aircraft. This is our GPS legacy avionics system output, so it's an option there. And IFDs also accept RS-170 video input. So considerations for non-WAAS aircraft. So as we discussed earlier, the GPS antenna type has to be changed to a WAAS antenna. In some parts of the world, they don't have WAAS capabilities yet. I know some parts of South America, Australia, places like that, they don't have WAAS. So this can be disregarded in most cases. GPS antenna location. So the antenna must be externally mounted, and this is not something just an Avidyne requirement, but if you read any of the GPS antenna manufacturers, whether it's Command, Rami, or even Garmin, like the GA series antennas, they have to be externally mounted. So even in composite aircraft, this is something we see a lot, that people complain about losing GPS at random, and usually it's from shadowing. And of course, if you're upgrading to a WAAS antenna, you'll also need to change the coaxial cable type. So usually you had RG58 coaxial cable, so these have to be upgraded to something like LMR or a higher RG number. So a couple of things to consider there. And now some special case interface changes. So GTX 345 requires one wire to be moved. And you can see this is the excerpt from our manual here. Originally with the Garmin, that RS-232 in on pin 59 on the IFD side there would go to pin 8. But with the GTX 345, it has to be moved to pin 12 for the RS-422. And of course, you have some configuration work in the GTX 345 to accept the input from the IFD, but other than that, it's just one wire change. We also have the GDL88. So the GDL88 will accept the traffic and weather output from, or sorry, the IFD will accept the traffic and weather output from the GDL88. But one thing to be aware of, if you do have a GDL88 and you are using it for your ADS-B out functionality, the IFD is not an approved GPS position source for that functionality. It'll do the in, but it won't do the ADS-B out. So there's a lot of reasons why you could upgrade to an IFD, right? So exceptional functionality. So we provide a lot more than what the GNSs originally did. A couple of things we have to remember. So we already talked about those special cases there. WAAS antennas, things like that, GDL88 we discussed. But also downtime on the aircraft. There's no panel work or really any major rewiring that needs to be done unless you want to get some additional functionality out of the IFD. So every aircraft is different. You should definitely consult with your avionics dealer prior to any installation, or even contact pilot support at avidyne.com if you have any specific questions about the avionics you have in your aircraft. Oh, sorry, I skipped one. Let me go back. There we go. So we have a promotion going on right now. So we have a free installation promotion that's been extended. So with the GNS-to-IFD promotion, you get a free or a $300 credit for your installation through December 31st of this year. So that's assuming a labor rate of $150 an hour, 2 hours of labor. So anyone that's registered for this webinar will receive that, or if you have any questions, just go ahead and contact us.
And just to be clear, there's a conflict on the dates on that slide. It is extended through January 31st.
Oh,
as it shows on the actual coupon here. We'll send that out to you.
Thank you, Tom. All right. So some resources we have our Avidyne YouTube channels, we have our Avidyne main channel, we also have the Avidyne tech support channel. So there's a lot of good information there that helps you understand the ins and outs of the IFD, and perhaps to get to know the equipment a little bit better. If you visit avidyne.com, we have all our latest pilot guides published there. Also, we have our pilot knowledge base. You can also email us to techsupport@avidyne.com or pilotsupport@avidyne.com for any additional questions you may have. And please do visit us on our social media pages, our Facebook, the Avidyne Pilots Club, I'm a part of that, and also our Instagram. All right, and we'll open up the floor to some questions. Any questions, Tom or Billy?
See, we had a question from a gentleman on the GTX 330 ES, whether that requires a wiring change, and it does not, because it's only for the 345, which has ADS-B out as well as in. I'm sorry, yeah, ADS-B in as well as out. I may have it backwards, but the 330 only does ADS-B out, so it doesn't receive traffic and weather, which is what that input that we need a wiring change for from the 345. I don't know if I got that worse or better.
Yeah.
Is it another question? Is it possible to get this presentation? If you send me an email, marketing@avidyne.com, I'll be happy to send a PowerPoint of it. We're going to have this webinar recorded. It will be on our YouTube channel, and we can send you a link to the recording as well. So
Also, everybody in attendance will get the video sent to them.
Yeah, we'll send a link to the video to everybody on the call here. Let's see. Can you get weather or traffic from a Stratus ADSB? I assume no, but had to ask.
Yes, you can. If it's a Stratus 3, the IFD will accept the input for that. That's a Wi-Fi protocol problem. So the Stratus 1 and the Stratus 2 won't do that. They use extended GDL90. The IFD is looking for UDP 4000 or Capstone protocol. So, and that's something that's configurable with the Stratus Horizon app. So if you have a Stratus 3, it'll work. There's several devices out there, ADSB in devices that can do that. So the Stratus, the StratTux as well, and the Level products.
How's the interface with the GFC 500 autopilot?
So GFC 500 autopilot is always a hard point that people ask about. So the short answer is it does work, but it depends on your installation. It depends if you have a G5 driving it or GI 275. So a lot of the G5 pilots are happy. There's been no reported issues with that. The GI 275, the only thing that has been reported, which is going to be fixed with the next release of software, hopefully coming soon, is that sometimes, and this only occurs on GPS approaches, the course deviation will indicate centered, that you're on the localizer for a GPS, but the actual aircraft position will be up to 1 dot left or right of the actual approach center, the final approach course. So that's the only real complaint there is. So that's just something to be aware of, and you might have to actually hand fly it. And it's something to do with the GFC accepting the protocol through the GAD29, which the IFD is providing. But again, that's going to be corrected in our next release of software.
Okay, thank you, Will. I have a GNS 430 as a number 2 connected to an Aspen Pro Max. Any changes with those connections?
There should be no changes with the connections, assuming that you're having air data go to the GNS. That should already be wired to that tray. So it just might be some configuration changes, a little bit different, but most configurations from the GNS do follow the IFD. But yeah, there should not be any problems with that at all.
Here's one from Ray. It says, tell us about the media and methods to update nav and terrain databases.
So the terrain databases haven't had any updates since 2015. All IFDs come with a terrain database already loaded in them. As far as the nav and obstacles, and even with the IFD 500 series, so your 550 and 540, those can display charts like approach plates and taxi diagrams. Those are all done through a subscription and through Jeppesen. So the IFDs themselves, you download the data through your computer on the Jeppesen JDM, Jeppesen Distribution Manager app, onto your USB stick, take that to your aircraft, and you upload the databases onto the IFD through USB.
Thanks, Will. Here's a question from Peter. Are you considering an alternative to EX500 600? And I'll answer that. Currently at this time, we're not doing any standalone MFDs. All of those MFD functionalities that came along back in the early 2000s are all built into an IFD now. So we have customers that just buy like an IFD 510 or a 410, which is GPS only, but they're getting all that same MFD capability that, or most of it, that an EX500 and 600 would have. So the short answer is we're not currently planning to do a standalone MFD to replace those. So what's the database update cost? Going back to your previous question.
Don't hold me to the candle on this one, but just trying to remember what the prices were. They were around $300 a year for the nav and obstacles. And I think for an additional $400 a year, so around $600 total, you can get charts as well. So if you have an IFD440, you don't need charts unless you're using the IFD100 app. That's just an optional thing there. But we have that in our pilot support knowledge base. So if you go to the pilot support knowledge base or even contacting Jeppesen, they have their prices listed on their website. And they did go through a pricing change recently, so that's it's a lot cheaper from what it used to be.
I was going to look it up real quick and see if I could find anything. I think that's pretty close. David's asking, will this work with the remote transponders like the GTX 345R? And
GTX 345R.
I think it's like a 33R, isn't it? Something like that. But the short answer is no, we don't work with, we can't control their remote mounted Garmin transponders. Avidyne offers an AXP322 remote transponder. But short answer is no.
Yeah, the only other remote transponder that Avidyne can control is the NGT 9000, which there's not a whole lot of those out there, but yeah, we can do those.
I have a GDL82 GTX 327. Do I need to upgrade to a different transponder?
The 327 will be fine as far as transponder functions go, but GDL82, we don't have a protocol that'll work with that, unfortunately.
Right. So because the 327 is mode C only.
Yeah.
I mean, you could put in a UAT and 978 in out or out to be compliant, but the GDL88 won't talk to the Avidyne. It's on a proprietary protocol.
GDL82, yeah.
82, sorry. When's the GI275 software update coming out?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I would recommend looking up on Garmin perhaps and see when that's coming out, or if it's the IFD software to help out with the GFC 500, hopefully by end of the year, beginning of next year.
Yeah, it's rolled in with the Vantage release. It's all coming out at once, and that's kind of looks like it's probably going to be early next year at this point. So they're working to get that across the finish line. So we're all holding our breath here. Hopefully that'll be here soon. Oh, let's see what else. We got a bunch of good questions here. I really appreciate you guys participating here. Does the IFD support VNAV for approaches?
So the IFD does have, we have an en route VNAV capability with the latest software, but the VNAV capability on an approach, I mean, it depends on the autopilot. We output the protocols for it. It just depends on your HSI and your autopilot. Some autopilots only have a lateral feature, and some have a glide slope capture. So it just depends on the autopilot. But I guess yes, for the sake of this question, it depends on the autopilot.
Here's a question. Lonnie's asking, does Avidyne still have an office in Boulder? And we don't technically have an office there. We've got an engineer that lives out there, but all the other folks that used to be in that office either left or have migrated to Melbourne. So, but we still have one of our guys out there that works remote, but not like we don't have a hard wall, office, brick and mortar. Let's see. What about installations in an AW109S and any experience or STC known on your side?
So Avidyne doesn't organically have its own STC for the 109, but it has been done either by field approval. I believe Horizon Avionics in England actually has the STC paperwork for it, but yeah, it has been done in 109s and various other rotorcraft.
If you want to get access to that STC data, send an email to me at marketing@avidyne.com, and I can get you in touch with Michael over at Horizon, who owns the STC. and they sell it at a nominal cost. So, let's see. Is the color function of your storm scope finally being implemented on the IFD 540/550, or is it still just WX500? Still just WX500. We didn't implement the color. We wanted to make it kind of compatible with. There's a huge installed base of the GNSs out there, and virtually all of them are hooked to a WX500. So we wanted to make sure we covered that. Frankly, there aren't a lot of the color lightning out there. So, but the color lightning display will work in the monochrome mode. Let's see. Is my flight stream 210 worthless with my IFD 440s, or will it talk to them?
No more flight stream 210 or 510, yeah. Because the IFDs have that capability already built into them, there's no use with the flight stream devices. So
I wouldn't say worthless, but you could certainly sell it, but it won't do
yeah.
you any good in that airplane if you got full IFDs. Let's see what else. Are database updates made when uploaded or deferred to their effective date?
So database updates aren't reserved. I get this question a lot. If I have a new nav cycle that has yet to take effect and I upload it, it's actually just going to overwrite the data in there. So, and the IFD will tell you that the data is not yet in effect until this date. So there's no harm in doing that. Just be aware of any changes in the data, at least for the planned route of flight. That may take effect, whether it's a frequency or a procedure or anything like that. Sometimes things are affected by NOTAM. So there's no harm in doing it, a couple of days early, but usually just wait until the next cycle comes along and then update it, usually either the day before or when you actually go flying.
Okay. Is the G5 supported? I think we talked about that. Yes, it is.
Yeah, the G5 is, yeah.
Will the VNAV work in the GFC 500 when connected? And I think we have the
That's a
en
good
route
question.
descent VNAV, right? Is that working
Yeah,
on that?
so we have en route VNAV and we have the approach
Or is
VNAV.
yeah,
Yeah, I think on the G5 it'll
it's
work. I'm not
advisory.
sure if the GFC 500 will accept that though.
Yeah, I think
There's
it
only
might be
certain,
advisory only for now.
yeah.
If I enter an arrival procedure, can I delete waypoints? For example, if the arrival is a waypoint 1, 2, 3, and 4, can I delete waypoint 1 and 2, leaving just waypoint 3 and 4?
I don't think you can actually delete parts of the arrival, but you can do a direct to that waypoint. The only thing I caution against that is if you're cleared to descend via the arrival route direct to a waypoint, which foregoes all the previous altitude restrictions. If you do a direct to, it's going to cut you directly to that waypoint instead of along the route. So I would have to test this out myself, but I would side on no, that you cannot delete the waypoints in an approach or an arrival rather.
Thanks. Can you cross fill between an IFD and a GNS?
No, that's not possible.
Yeah, they talk different languages. What additional installation is needed for an IFD 550? Nothing.
Yeah, nothing. I mean, if you have a GNS 530, IFD 550 or 540 goes in, and just any sort of wiring changes like the standby comm monitor or anything like that, or FLTA wiring. So,
Right. Yeah, the difference between a 540 and a 550 is the 550 has that attitude reference sensor built in, but it does not require any additional wiring to enable that extra function. One of the other questions I get, it's not on here, but I do get is, we get a lot is can I use the IFD 550? Is it a legal standby? And I want to emphasize that the attitude reference sensor and the attitude display in the 550 is TSO'd. In other words, it meets all the TSO compliance. We can't take credit for it as a legal standby, meaning you can't get rid of a of your other standby gauge, because we can take the attitude display down on the IFD 550. You know, you can switch to a map or some other screen. So one of the requirements for a standby is A, it has to be visible all the time, and B, it has to have independent power source. So we don't meet those requirements to make it a legal standby. But like in this picture you see here, if you had an Aspen and then you've got a standby down in the bolster somewhere and they disagree, you can trust the 550 as the tiebreaker. You'll know, you know, that if the 550 and one of those agree, you can feel good about, okay, that's the proper attitude. You see what I mean? So it is an FAA approved TSO attitude sensor in that regard. Let's see what else we got here. Does this work with a GAD 42, 43, 43E to interface with analog autopilots?
It does not, no. Actually, sorry, the GAD 42, yeah, I'm sorry. I was thinking of GAD 29. No, yeah, it works with a GAD 42. I'm not sure about the 43 or the 43E, but I know the GAD 29, the regular and the B model, as well as the GAD 42 do work.
Can you get weather and traffic from a Sentry?
Sentry.
I
So the
believe that's
Sentry,
the
yeah, that's
no,
another extended GDL 91.
right. That's a proprietary for-flight receiver, I believe, and the answer is no. There seem to be communication issues between SkyDemon on iPad and IFD. It takes a lot of time to become active. I don't know if you've been seeing anything like that, Will, but I use it quite a bit in my demos and it works great. But there may be something else acting on that. Will, you got any suggestions?
Yeah, I haven't heard too many problems between SkyDemon and the IFDs lately. I know there was a time a while ago when 10.3, the first iteration of it came out, that there were some problems, and it was just a setup thing. So it could be set up in this case, and it could also be something perhaps with the IFD, like the micro SD cards. So if you send an email to pilotsupport@avidyne.com and ask for Will, it'll come to me and I can help out with that.
Thanks, Will.
Yes, sir.
I have a 2002 G1 SR22 Garmin 430Ws. Will it be plug and play install for me with two IFD 440s?
Yes. It depends on the transponder, of course. If you have a GTX 345, there's that one change that we talked about, but any other transponder is pretty straightforward. Assuming you either have the Avidyne PFD and MFD, or even if it's an MFD only aircraft, all that wiring and everything remains the same. So yes, but it depends on the transponder. But if you have any other questions or details on that, feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email, and I can help out with that as well.
And just to add to that, of course, if you want to be able to hear the terrain alerting audio in your headset, and if you want to be able to monitor your standby comm, you would need to add those wires, but those are optional. They're not required. We recommend it, of course, but it's always caveats. Let's see. Confirm that ForeFlight will send and receive to the 440. Absolutely.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of videos on YouTube of how to make that happen. But yeah, if you can build your flight plans at home on your ForeFlight, take them out to the airplane, and it'll squirt them right in through Wi-Fi into the IFD 440, or you can save a flight plan from the 440 back to ForeFlight if you want as well, and it'll keep the moving map up to date on the ForeFlight as you fly.
Yeah, Billy just brought up a good point, actually. Our next webinar is, I believe, December 5th, and we're going to go over this. And
Oh, good.
I actually flight instruct in the plane that's in the picture here, and I use ForeFlight, so it works. I've transferred flight plans back and forth, and yeah, get traffic and weather and all that. So it works great.
So what change is required for the 345? Again, you've got to move that pin 8 of the number 1 connector to pin 12 of the number 2 connector. It's in this webinar. Yeah, we'll just whip back through that slide. One more.
There we go.
Yeah, so this wire was in pin 8 if it was a 430, But when you pull it out and put an IFD in on the 345 side, move it to pin 12 of the number 2 connector. And that'll put your ADSB weather and traffic from the GTX 345 so it can be displayed on the IFD. What are the breaker recommended for 14 volts? I believe you said it goes from a 7.5.
Yeah, so for 14-volt aircraft, the main breaker, so your GPS 1 or 2 breaker, whatever's giving the IFD the power, has to be changed to a 7.5 amp breaker for the main aircraft power in, and the COM breaker has to be changed to a 10 amp. Originally, and I think it shows it in the GNS drawing, you can see that on the 5002 connector and on the 530 there. It's a 5 amp for the 28 volt, 10 amp for the 14. We just ask for the 10 amp regardless of the aircraft electric system for the COM. But yeah, main breaker has to be 7.5 for 14 volts.
All right, thanks, Will. What's the latest software version now, as of today?
Latest software version is 10.3.1.2. And that's you can request it on our website or email us and we can send you the request link, or you can even go to an Avidyne dealer and have it done as well.
Okay, any issues connecting to G3X?
Nope, that works as well. So that's in our installation manual. That's STC'd.
Yep. Will the 440 work with a TrueTrack Vizio 386 autopilot?
Yes, it will.
Okay.
That's not part of our STC. The wiring and recommended configurations is in the TrueTrack autopilot installation manual, but even the club plane that we have has a TrueTrack autopilot. So yeah, that works.
Neil's got a comment here. It sounds like you don't display traffic. Disregard. I'm glad to hear about the SkyDeem and flight plan integration. We do display traffic, and even if you're using a portable, if like a Stratus 3, it'll communicate and send traffic and weather to the IFD if it's configured properly. So then we definitely display ADSB traffic, and we also display active traffic if you're in parts of the country that don't have ADSB. So parts of the world, I should say. All right. Lots of good questions here. Any issues with UAvionics Echo UAT? Familiar with that?
No, actually,
that,
we've tested that, and actually I spoke to the UAT guys at Oshkosh this year and went over some configurations. A gentleman came up and asked the same exact question, so I wasn't sure, and I went over to them, and sure enough, it works. So, and I've actually had people tell me that it's working out in the field. So you would have to look into their manual again for some specifics, but I know that we output a protocol that they can accept for GPS position.
Very good. That's all I have for questions here. Anybody else want? Here's one. Will the 440 work with the STEC 55X using G5? Easy peasy,
Using
right?
G5, it should, because that goes through the GAD. It's no different than the EX5000. So yeah, it should work. It just has to get digitized. So it goes from IFD to the G5 or whatever the HSI is being used, and then to the STEC. So yeah, that works.
Yep. All right. Very good. Lots of good questions today. That's it. That's all we have for now.
Already
You want
then?
to scroll down to the last slide there?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you have any other questions, send to pilot support at Avidyne. That'll go right to Will. Or if you got any questions for me in marketing at avidyne.com, we'll be happy to follow up with you. You will see an email from us with that promo coupon as well, and a link to the video of this webinar.
Alrighty then. Thank you very much, Tom, for all the help, and thank you for everyone for attending the webinar.
Fly safe, everybody, and have a great day.